There is so much happening in America this week. We've had the election results that we have been getting into all day. We'll have more on that on radio tomorrow. Also, President Biden is in Scotland, rubbing shoulders with the world's richest and most powerful people at the latest UN climate summit. President Biden brought along 13 cabinet members and other high-ranking officials to the event. Why? Well, because this administration believes that climate change is the most urgent crisis in America and the rest of the world. In fact, the most urgent the world has ever faced. Meanwhile, back at home, you're paying $10 for hamburger, $4 for a gallon of gasoline. Actual tangible crises are happening, and that's not even mentioning the one that is now 9 months old since President Biden took office. It is America's border crisis. Well, tonight, in an exclusive interview, an insider's view of the problems, how we got here, how things grew wildly out of hand under President Biden, and what we have to do to fix it. Hello, America. I've been waiting for this interview for quite some time. In fact, September 11th is when I was like, anything, we have to have this guy on. This is a letter to the Senate and to the House saying this border crisis is much more than anyone is even admitting to. The border crisis is not the only disaster happening on Joe Biden's watch right now, but it may be the most ignored, both by the president and the mainstream media. The border is one of those off-again, on-again crises that the White House and Congress and politicians never really ever seem interested in actually solving. Now, at least the Trump administration made some policy tweaks that made the border situation much more manageable. Seemed like we were on the right track there. But President Biden threw out all of that stuff as soon as he took office. For fiscal year 2021, that covers last October through this September, our U.S. Border Patrol arrested over 1.7 million illegal migrants at the southern border. That's the most arrests at the border ever recorded, and it is a 378% increase over fiscal year 2020. So even if you allow that COVID likely reduced the numbers in 2020, this year has still seen almost twice the number of detainees than 2019. And the 1.7 million this year only includes those who were apprehended. The number of gotaway incidents, as the Border Patrol calls them, has averaged over 1,000 people a day. 1,000. Under Biden, ICE arrests are down to the lowest level in over a decade, just 72,000 in 2021. That, by the way, just for your information, is less than half the average of 148,000 that were arrested between 2017 and 2019. Then we find out last month from Fox News, they obtained Border Patrol documents which show the Biden administration has allowed at least 160,000 illegal immigrants to be released into the United States since March, flying many of these people in the middle of the night, wait deep into our heartland. Any way you look at the border right now, it is a crisis that this administration has absolutely no handle on. If we're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and that is keep America safe and secure. But boy, looking at the behavior, I'm not sure you can honestly say that with true conviction about this administration. Last month, an AP poll found 35% of Americans approve of Biden's handling of immigration. And you really know things are not going well when the Washington Post says that Biden's strategy of making Kamala Harris his liaison for border issues, quote, has little to no measurable effect, and Harris has distanced herself from the border and immigration issues generally. This has clearly been 9 months of border chaos. and yet the president and the White House do nothing. Is that inexperience? Is that sabotage? Or is that just an inability to read the room? I saw something this last weekend that almost made my head explode. I mean, I don't know how to pay taxes if this is what we're going to do. The Biden administration is now in talks to offer $450,000 per person as compensation to immigrant families who were separated during the Trump administration. The payments could amount to around $1 million per family. Are you kidding me? That's more money than victims of 9/11 got. That is more money than any soldier that is shipped off to war and dies. It's more compensation than their family gets. And it's strange, it's only happening during the Trump administration, not the Obama administration. And why would our government be paying people who came here illegally? The total government payout could be over $1 billion because 940 families have already filed claims. At the end of President Biden's press conference in Rome over the weekend, Fox News' Peter Doocy asked him whether it was true our government is going to give $450,000 to the victims of border separation. Here's Biden's response. He just kind of looked away. There he's listening. Now he's going to look away, and he scratches his forehead like, I don't know what I don't know. Maybe he's going off to play with more elevators. Who knows? Now, here's my question. If 940 families get almost $1 million each, can you imagine the size of the caravans that will head for the U.S. border once word of this $1 million payout gets around? And speaking of caravans, just over a week ago, yet another one of the approximately 3,000 migrants steamrolled through a roadblock of 400 Mexican National Guard troops. You see, they have National Guard troops on their southern border, but somehow or another it's racist for us to do it. The caravan was making its way through a city near Mexico's border with Guatemala on its long trek towards the U.S. Here's what the caravan leader said. Biden's immigration policies are pulling migrants towards the U.S., quote, like cattle. The situation has been so overwhelming at the border this year that a spokesman for the Border Patrol's union said, quote, morale's in the toilet because agents aren't allowed to do their job. If our job is to be out patrolling the border in between the ports of entry and actively searching for people who have crossed illegally, but we're not allowed to go do that job, it basically creates this defeated feeling in everyone. Everyone shows up to work sort of downtrodden, almost dead inside, end quote. So how did we get here? The government's own stats reveal an unprecedented shift in illegal border crossings this year. What could it have been that triggered such a dramatic change? John F. Kennedy said something that I read a few weeks ago, and I keep thinking about it almost every day, and that is, an error doesn't become a mistake unless you don't correct the error. So you can make an error of judgment, let's say on the border, but when you don't correct it, in fact, you double down, now you're into mistake territory, and when you do double down, now I have to question your motive. What's really happening? Tonight, I have the privilege of talking with recently retired, in air quotes, U.S. Border Patrol Chief Rodney Scott. Scott served 29 years in the U.S. Border Patrol, serving in multiple key leadership roles. He started his career in 1992, served under 5 different presidential administrations. His role at the U.S. Border Patrol is nonpartisan. Again, he's worked for 5 different presidents. Now, this is the way all of our elected leaders should approach border policy and everything else, but they rarely do. Rodney Scott does not have a political axe to grind. He does, however, have decades of firsthand knowledge of the U.S. border, what works, what doesn't, and what we must change to keep America's border secure. This very brave man is going to try to explain to me his very frightening letter to Congress and the Senate. Next. If you don't own a home, you got nothing to fear from home title thieves. However, if you do own a home, like I do, and you don't guard it with home title lock, like I do, you're practically inviting home title fraud. This is one of the fastest growing crimes in the U.S. Cyber thieves around the world know that our home values are sky high, and because of that, you probably have a lot more equity than you did before. And this makes you a target. The crime is incredibly simple. All they do is just forge your signature, drop something off at the city, and it's done. It's done. Now, he's on the deed of your home, and you don't even know you've been a victim. He takes out loans on your home and vanishes into thin air, leaving you to prove to the police that you didn't commit bank fraud, that you're not a squatter in somebody else's house. Home Title Lock puts a virtual barrier around your home's title, and the instant they detect tampering, they help to shut it down. If you have equity in your home, you should be on guard, and guard it with the best. HomeTitleLock.com. Register your address to see if you're already a victim, and enter RADIO for 30 days of free protection. That's code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com. In his first in-depth interview, we have the former chief of U.S. Border Patrol. I'm so happy that you are here, and I have to thank you for telling the truth and not waiting for a big book deal or anything else, but coming out and speaking out about this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today with you as well.
Okay. I want to start with going over this amazing letter that you wrote on September 11th. And I just go with me on some of this. I'm sickened by the avoidable and rapid disintegration of what was arguably the most effective border security in our nation's history. Does that mean that what we were doing in the last administration, or the border wall, or what is that?
All the above. So you mentioned in the intro, 29 years I've been doing this. So for over 29 years, a little short of that, gatekeeper was 94. So what, about 27 years, we really started starting to fine tune a border strategy. And it involved infrastructure, but it also involved policies. But it really wasn't until the last administration that we had a single voice of government, and we really started making significant improvements in border security. And I would go beyond even the single voice in government. We started getting a single voice in the Western Hemisphere. The last administration worked with Mexico to create a regional border security strategy. All the way down to Border Patrol personnel. We're going down to Guatemala and Honduras and working with those countries to create a regional border security strategy. That it wasn't just about the U.S., it was about all those nations, and it was about really taking money out of the cartel's pockets and shutting off this mass migration. And it was working, but it was a multi-phased approach. It wasn't just the Border Patrol, it was a whole of government, and that all ended on January 20th.
Because this has been a problem with every president in my lifetime. Every single president. And it doesn't seem to me like anybody ever really wants to solve it until this last administration. Then you say common sense border security recommendations from experienced career professionals are being ignored and stymied by inexperienced political appointees. Is it inexperience?
When I wrote that letter, I believed every word of that, and I still believe that some of it is inexperience. Some of the political appointees at staff level positions that I interacted with, they just have like a utopian view of the world. They don't see second, third level effects of any decisions, and it is inexperience. I do not equate that to the Secretary of Homeland Security or the President. The Secretary clearly knows what he's doing. He's got experience, and he's making these decisions for whatever reason, but knowing that the impacts are negative.
So you say Secretary Mayorkas is choosing to ignore sound recommendations of career government leadership, despite his own admission that he agrees with them. So you've been in meetings, and he has said, yes, I agree with you, but then there's no follow through, or he goes the other direction? What is that?
That's an accurate assessment. So from his prior experience with DHS and then to his first meetings with all the senior leadership, he acknowledged that there has to be consequences to stop the flow. We need to basically have something in place or the mass migration was going to continue. And then every single recommendation that was made to keep policies that were in place or at least not tear them down until they had some kind of a new plan were ignored. To include stopping the border wall construction, which was worse, just so everybody understands, than just not building a wall. It's not that simple. That new border wall was replacing barriers that had been built in 2006 and even before that were dilapidated, but they were still there. But to replace them, you had to remove them. So now the border has more vulnerabilities than even before because construction stopped midstream. Think about doing a massive remodel of your home. Well, you had to rip the bathroom out, and now you're rebuilding it. Now there's no bathroom. So where we had gates that were working before, even though they weren't great, now it's just an open gap. Where we had barriers before, it's just an open gap with material laying around because they stopped all construction.
Was the border wall where it was being finished, did you see an effect? Was there an effect with the border wall?
Oh yeah, that's a proven, this should not be political in any way. It wasn't political in '06 when they had the Secure Fence Act. It's just different materials back then, overnight. And it's a simple concept. Every individual Border Patrol agent can patrol significantly more area with a barrier that slows people down. The Border Patrol had almost 3 decades worked with different barriers. Then the prototypes under the Trump administration was the first time we brought industry in, gave them our problem set and said, hey, what solutions do you guys potentially have that we haven't looked at? We took all those lessons and then we were building a new border wall based on that. And the return on the taxpayer's dollar is just phenomenal in my opinion. That border wall is about a 25 to 30 year investment minimum. You're paying for agent salaries every single day. Where we proved out this concept in San Diego with old infrastructure, we were able to pull 150 agents out of a 12-mile area every 24 hours while improving effectiveness from 10% all the way to 90%.
Wow.
So that return on the investment was going to be spread out along the entire southwest border. And the other thing, if I can just inject, because we talk so much about America, and we should, because America should be first, but we ignore the benefits to Mexico. If you go to San Diego now, there are big sections along the border that are safe on the Tijuana side. Because once we established border security, established law and order, all that crime on the south side went away too. And then developers came in and started building condos and nice parks, and people could actually move about safely. Border security is just that. It's about law and order. It's about safety and security. It should not be a partisan issue.
You say in this, to think that well-resourced terrorist networks, criminal organizations, hostile nations are not doing the same is naive. I can't believe what we are supporting and actually now, in a way, helping fund and grow. These cartels are out of control.
They're getting more powerful daily, and the happiest day they've had in a long time was January 20th.
You say that the DHS has provided factually incorrect information to congressional representatives and to the American public. What do you mean by that?
I sat in meetings, and this was part of the reason that I ended up retiring, I believe, and pushed back about press releases that were going out. Everything from the numbers of people that were being released into the U.S., the COVID testing. I was on calls where an individual at DHS told a congressional representative that everybody being released in a certain geographic area on the border was being COVID tested, which they were trying to put a plan in place to do that. Not a single one of them was being COVID tested. So I had to go behind the scenes and fix that and make sure that representative knew what the truth was. But there were too many issues like that where people were saying, government officials, new political appointees, were saying things they wanted to be true, but they weren't true yet. And I just could not support that. And that's part of the reason that I ended up writing that letter.
So it seems to me that, when you've released 160,000 people and you've flown them into the country without anybody's knowledge, you're just dumping them into cities. That's the most irresponsible thing I could possibly think of, especially when they haven't been COVID tested, they haven't received a vaccine that every American now is supposed to have, but somehow or another they're not. You're not dealing with honest brokers on the government side. And you wrote here, the professional staff within DHS is left perplexed, wondering who's really in charge and what the objective is. I think that last question is more important. First, is there anything reasonable that would explain all of this, that they really think somehow or another in some utopian mindset that all of this would work? Or what is the objective? Because it doesn't seem like we are on the same page in what we're trying to do.
So I do my best to try to stay out of the politics. 29 years as a government servant. Part of the reason that I was pushed out is I was labeled as a Trump holdover or some type of a partisan just because I spoke the truth and said the wall makes a difference and gave some tours on the border. I don't want to try to speculate on what their reasoning is, but it sure isn't about securing the border, and it sure isn't about putting America first. Because you said this is a national security threat, when does America start to feel this? Right now they're putting people, 1.7 million people, that's twice the population of Washington, D.C. And that's what we know of. When do we start feeling the effects of this? So I believe we're feeling it now, but people don't think about it. So even this conversation, and I allow this to happen to myself all the time, we talk about border security and then we'll slide into one small subcomponent or highly visible subcomponent of border security. And we've been talking a lot about the illegal immigration. Mm-hmm. So the illegal immigration, flying people around, all these, they're big, they're very important issues. But what we haven't talked about, and what I'm talking about when I say national security, is that mass immigration overwhelms the Border Patrol agents. The cartels figured out how to do this systematically over and over again, and that's what they're doing constantly. Nothing crosses the southwest border without the approval or without paying the cartel. And they're only going to do it to allow things to cross to their benefit. So when we have these massive groups of, let's talk about family units in McAllen or Rio Grande Valley for a minute. If you were a family unit crossing into the United States and your objective was to surrender to U.S. Border Patrol personnel as soon as you saw one, why would you cross at 1 in the morning? Mm-hmm. Because the cartel's controlling that so that they can open gaps in our border security by overwhelming the Border Patrol resources, pulling all the agents into an area to deal with these super large groups. The Del Rio Bridge is a perfect example, actually an extreme example. Hundreds of miles of border were evacuated by U.S. Border Patrol for days. There were literally hundreds of miles of U.S. border, but we have no idea what crossed for days. The entire time all those cameras were focused on Del Rio. That meant cartel was bringing fentanyl, cocaine, heroin, and people that aren't willing to surrender across that border. If you had a fentanyl death in your community, then it's hitting you. That came from Mexico. We don't have huge fentanyl labs in the U.S. That's what the cartel's bringing in behind this. And the administration wants to talk about the immigration and the humanity, which we need to talk about that aspect, but you can't separate it. You either have secure borders or you don't.
Why did they go after the people from Haiti so fast? Why? We've had this border problem for 9 months. All of a sudden, you see these people making camp underneath the bridge, and that's all anybody talks about. And they act quickly. Why?
Because it got attention. Because it was overwhelming. They were in the U.S. They were no longer in Mexico. And it got a lot of cameras showed up, to be quite honest. So you said, when does America feel it? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't think about the border as affecting them, but nothing stays at the border.
Yeah.
Cameras showed up, cameras exposed what was going on to all of America, and it was an extreme situation. But I want to remind people, that's happening every day. There's a caravan coming up through Mexico now. I think last I heard it was like 3,000.
Yeah.
Border Patrol's arresting 6,000 to 7,000 people with 1,000 getaways on a daily basis before when I left office. So you're dealing with 2 caravans every single day, but no one wants to cover it. Del Rio got covered because it was in one place and somehow it got the attention. And as soon as it gets attention, then the administration moves in. Then they falsely accuse Border Patrol agents of mistreating people to try to misdirect away from their failed border policies. There's been no findings on that case because they're going to find those agents did nothing wrong.
Back in just a minute. Homeowners have quite the opportunity in front of them right now. More than ever, you can save money when you need to. Hundreds of dollars a month, maybe even up to $1,000 a month. All you have to do is refinance your mortgage. Don't wait too long. Things are changing, and I believe it's going to get harder and harder to get financing. And I'll explain that on radio tomorrow with what's happening with the Global Warming Summit. Today's the financial day. You could miss out on historically low mortgage rates right now. Get a free mortgage review from American Financing. You can learn about a custom loan program that may fit your life a little better, or a shorter term for your mortgage can save you huge money in interest paid over the life of your mortgage, or how to access cash to help pay down credit cards and shore up your credit. You're going to be in a better position for whatever comes next in our economy and our country. American Financing, they have consultants that work for you, not for the banks. Call them here at the number on the bottom of the screen, 800-906-2440, 800-906-2440, or go to americanfinancing.net. Did it drive you nuts when you heard President Biden say, what was it about the Haitians? We let them go because they're not going to be here for very long. They didn't come here to stay here.
Yeah, where do you get that idea?
I mean, do people
tell
come?
them?
Do they cross to come on vacation?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge.
Yeah.
Is the UN? I've heard people say that the UN is on the other side of the border, helping facilitate because of the new, Agenda 2030 human right to migrate.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Even under the last administration, we looked at working with UNHCR to make sure that different countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and Mexico, were building out legitimate asylum processes so that if you're really truly have an asylum claim, your fear of persecution, say in Guatemala, that you'd have other options. You wouldn't just shop with the U.S. But I'm not sure the current status. You say, I urge you to request, this is to the Senate and House, I urge you to request detailed information from DHS CBP on the number of individuals with terrorist screening database alerts that USBP has arrested for this fiscal year. To ensure that you're not misled, please specifically ask for comparative data from previous years broken. I want to ask you about that stat. You obviously know what that stat says, and I need to know what it means and what it says. But also, I was struck by, you're talking to senators. Who would mislead them? In my opinion, the entire time that I was the chief, post January 20th, anytime we talked about border security, we talked about the border in border security context, or wanted to talk about anything that's an actual threat, we would be challenged. When we started talking about the cost of shutting down the border wall, the true impacts, we would immediately be challenged. And I was in meetings and privy to information where political appointees were having in-depth conversations of how to misrepresent, I take it as misrepresent, not lie, but provide just enough information to answer a question, but not enough to provide Congress with the full picture. In court, that would be lying, to be honest. But in this context, in D.C., it seems to be just politics. So I didn't trust them. So I was encouraging Congress to ask the right question.
And so what does the right question get you? What answer do you find?
That there are real, true threats to this country, terrorist threats crossing the southwest border. I can't get into numbers. I do not agree with that number being classified, but currently the way that CBP looks at it and the government looks at it, the specific number of people is considered law enforcement sensitive. But Congress can have that number, and they just need to ask. And
what kind of threats are coming across? Is it cartel? Is it like gang warfare, or is it terrorist, jihadi?
So it's all of the above, but the TSDB, the terrorist screening database, that is specifically focused on known or suspected terrorists. That was created after 9/11. Terrorist Screening Center runs that. FBI works that. The intel behind it is not always available to the frontline agents, actually very, very rarely, but it's an alert that pops up.
And is this, you suspect, worse now after Afghanistan?
I would suspect that it would be worse after Afghanistan, but the southwest border specifically, the threat has been increasing. I spent 5 years working anti-terrorism issues after DHS was first formed. We saw the threats emerging then. We knew that it was going to increase. But back then, the primary threat, like 9/11, was at the ports of entry. So CBP smartly spent a ton, the government smartly spent a ton of money and resources to tighten up the ports of entry. But we knew it would go somewhere else. Well, it's going somewhere else. And I believe Congress and the Senate, and I honestly believe the American people have a right to know that information.
So let me play devil's advocate here, because I have seen in your own letter, you say you retired. I think I understand the context of that. But fired, ousted, removed, retired have all been used. What happened? Why did you leave? What happened?
Well, I've probably used all those terms myself. So I did elect to retire. But at the senior executive level positions within the government, beyond just the Border Patrol, but at government positions, you can be moved at the discretion of the administration to any other equivalent position. So I was told in June, I think it made headlines, it leaked out a little bit. I was told in June that I was going to be moved out of the chief's position. I was told that they would, to be totally transparent, I was told they really wanted me to stay. They really wanted me to be part of the team, and that they would give me any field leadership position that I wanted if I was willing to stay. I asked if they didn't trust me to be chief. Why would they trust me in one of those positions? And I got a very weird, nonsensical answer. Literally, it just, I'm sorry you feel that way. Didn't even answer the question. The conversation went on. That was the only answer I got. I felt very, very strongly that I was being offered another position so they could control my voice. You do not see CBP standing up right now at the end of the month like we did under the last administration, giving numbers, answering questions in front of reporters every single month. Anything that's coming out of DHS right now is a scripted talking point handed to them by the political appointees. And I felt like if I stayed, I would still be under that. And I thought the risk, the threat of what was going on was too severe. 29 years is a good long career. I was eligible to retire. So when I was issued that letter, we called it a 3R letter. You can resign, you can relocate, or you can retire. I chose to retire so that I could speak out. And I did everything I could to try to go through the legitimate processes. Before I ever did media, I tried to get the Senate and the House to actually get hearings, put people under oath, and ask questions, which is the way this should be done. But the current leadership, they wouldn't allow it.
So I was going to ask, anything come of this letter?
Yes, the Senate, some Republicans in the Senate, Senator Portman, Senator Johnson, Senator Scott held a border security roundtable recently, but they did that because the leadership refused to hold official hearings. I don't know what else will come out of it. Got a couple phone calls, but to be quite honest, most of the interest was from one side of the aisle and not the other.
Somebody said to me that I just don't think the White House sees the effect of everything. I just think they're just not aware of how bad. And I thought, well, that should be a red flare that maybe we have the wrong administration. And if you can't see something that big, when you're looking at all of this, and the Congress on either side doesn't respond to a letter like this, the question is why?
That is the question, and I think America should be asking that question a lot. I spent a very significant part of my career in California, which isn't exactly a conservative mecca. I had numerous conversations with government officials, with elected officials on both sides of the aisle, and almost without exception, within an hour, hour and a half border tour, they would get it. They may not always say something publicly, but they sure didn't fight border security, and they would usually walk away supporting it. I had Democrats bring other Democrats down and basically give my talking points because they were just based on evidence, fact, and common sense. I oversimplify the border sometimes. It's just like your home. If you can't control who and what enters your home, you have no security. So if we can't control who and what enters our country, we have no homeland security. When you start at that baseline, it kind of takes away the politics, and then you can get into the compartmentalized issues of immigration, narcotics, or whatever else. I had a lot of luck there until very recently, but all those conversations really seem to have died off after January 20th. Even though the Democrats have supported border security before, and I hate to use that term, I don't mean to get political, it's just a reality where I live now, don't seem to want anything to do with it. People that voted for the border wall and voted for common sense, reasonable border security measures act like they didn't do that. I can't fill in the why. I can, and I do off camera, but I'm not going to try to speculate on the national forum.
All right. A lot more to cover with you here in just a second. Let me just take a quick break. I love Thanksgiving, mainly because, I mean, look at me. You don't get a body like this without working for it. And over the holidays, I'm working. I grew up in a bakery. You don't think we have a few desserts hanging around the house? Oh, yes, we do. Built Bar is something that is out. They have upwards of, 130 calories. I think 140 is the maximum. They have 4 grams of sugar, some of them plenty of protein. I think it's 0 net carbs. They're fantastic, really fantastic. So take that pie, which is 300, 400 calories, take that pie and shelve it, and instead have some real chocolate, something that it's a candy bar. It's a candy bar. They say it's a health bar. I say it's a candy bar. Let that be your snack. Limited time flavors are arriving now at built.com. Check the site. Mark your Black Friday on your calendar and check built.com. Big things are coming. Built.com. Use the promo code BECK15 and get 15% off your order. Promo code BECK15 at built.com. So let me ask you just a few brush-up questions, and then I'm going to go back to the real issues here. But serving under 5 different administrations, it seems from the outside that nothing really ever changed with any of those in a positive direction until this last administration. I mean, there might have been little tweaks here and there, but it was the same kind of stuff. Is that true or not?
I don't necessarily believe that's true. When I joined the Border Patrol in 1992, there were 4,000 agents nationwide. So we've been systematically, you could argue we could have done more faster or put more money, but we've been systematically improving border security through trial and error and making investments once we've proven the concepts out since the 90s. And basically the idea was to take the urban areas back and then start expanding out. And then as new technology came out, we were rolling out new technology. One of the other things I should have touched on before, when we shut off that border wall, it also shut off a fiber optic cable installation, which was going to be the backbone of Border Patrol's communication and technology going forward. It was going to allow agents to see what was going on in the area, see where the other agents were, and respond smarter. It literally make them significantly more effective. All that got shut off as well. But my point is, we were incrementally making progress. There's no question whatsoever under the Trump administration, we made significantly more progress faster than ever before because we finally had a single federal government voice. He wouldn't allow different federal agencies to fight amongst themselves. Everybody had to get on the same page and do the same thing. All that went away on the 20th, but we were making incremental progress. I feel we've gone way, way back, and border security now is worse than ever. So
we've gone back farther than Donald Trump's times.
Oh, way farther. Yeah, we have gaps in the border now that we didn't even have under Obama because we tore out the old barriers. We were installing new, but now we can't. Just because, purely political.
What's that cost us?
When I left office, one of the briefings I got between DOD and the Border Patrol stalled projects. It was over $5 million. I think it was over $5 million a day to pay contractors not to build. But now some of those contracts are being shut off. But we already paid for all the steel. People forget Congress passed laws. They were signed off on. They were enacted to build border wall. Now that steel is just being scrapped. The fiber optic is being scrapped. You already paid for it. And then now we're still paying contractors to not build.
The COVID mandate for the Border Patrol, that made my eyes bleed. You're letting people in the country and they don't have to have COVID vaccine. Did the Border Patrol work a deal out where they don't have to get it? Or are they still required to have the vaccine?
No, and that's a huge problem, and the hypocrisy is just amazing. So I actually had some people reach out to me earlier this week from Border Patrol asking for some advice. But no, they're mandated to get the vaccine. The religious exemptions are a nightmare from what I understand. And only 52% of the Border Patrol has actually responded. They have a system they're supposed to go in and type in whether they have got the vaccine or not. So 48% of the Border Patrol either has not got the vaccine or just hasn't put it into the system. That's about 10,000 agents that are on the chopping block right now. At the same exact time, every day in front of them, they see it. It's not like the rest of America that hears about it. They see hundreds, if not thousands, of illegal aliens being released into the U.S. They're never COVID tested by the federal government. They're supposedly COVID tested by non-governmental agencies helping them get to their final destination. But no vaccine mandate because it's not legal. You can't force it on them.
So what's it going to take? I mean, you know, having 10,000 border agents marching down the street someplace would get coverage. And, you know, these guys who are on the front lines risking their lives and just being stomped on and I think being abused, what's it going to take?
That's a great question. I don't know what it's going to take. Border Patrol is one example. That the vaccine examples across the entire country, federal agencies wide. But the threat that the Border Patrol agents deal with every day and the fact that they've been going to work every day. They didn't get to sit from home and telework. They've been dealing pre-vaccine. They've been dealing with thousands of people that are cramped in trailers, into homes. There's no social distancing. And
Mexico was horrible. I mean, it had a horrible COVID problem.
Correct. And they've literally been, Title 42, for example, has been literally preserving the medical capabilities along the southwest border for U.S. citizens because that would have, if we would have let all those people in like we're currently doing, it quickly overwhelms the medical institutions. I don't know what's going to get the attention. I know that this administration doesn't seem to care about border security in any way, shape, or form. So whatever that driving factor is going to have to come from the outside. It's going to have to come from the American public.
So what is it are there any things that we're not being told that we haven't already talked about?
I'm sure there's more. Where does it end? I was systematically walled off from more and more conversations as time went on. But the border wall itself, for example, doesn't seem to get any attention. And when you do talk about it, they talk about it as the physical infrastructure. They don't explain that meant the roads went away, the access roads that we were getting. It doesn't mean, they don't talk about the hundreds of cameras that were already purchased that were going to be installed that are now being accessed, which they can't go in anyway without the fiber optic cabling and the power and all the other infrastructure. And then they don't talk about the impacts on legitimate trade and travel at the ports of entry. I was Border Patrol chief, but CBP is much broader than that. It's ports of entry as well. As we accept more and more economic migrants and act like it's legitimate asylum claims, that takes those CBP officers off the line as well. So that's going to continue to extend this supply chain shortage. Those same CBP officers that are supposed to be clearing shipping containers in Long Beach are the same ones that get detailed to the southwest border to deal with these mass migrations that don't have to take place. They were not taking place when there was a consequence. When they knew they could see a judge, but they weren't going to be allowed into the U.S. until after they saw the judge, they stopped coming because 90% of the claims are fraudulent and they know it. But when you release them into the U.S. to go hide for 3 to 4 years before their court date ever happens, there's no consequence.
What is it going to be like? What is it going to be like when people find out about I mean, do you think that we will give $1 million to families that?
Nothing surprises me now, and that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's a choice, and this is a scary part for the government. I've dealt with this. That's a lawsuit. So the ability to sign off on that lawsuit falls within DHS or within government employees. It doesn't have to go to Congress or anything else, even though it's a significant amount of money.
Right.
It's very interesting that the same administration or some of the same people that came in as political appointees were extremely outspoken and anti zero tolerance. And I remind the viewers as well, there was no separation policy. I'm not saying that was the best thing. I'm just saying there was no separation policy. There was a decision made to actually prosecute people criminally for a criminal act. And when you prosecute anybody, U.S. citizen, illegal alien, when they go to jail, they can't take their kids with them.
Correct.
So that's where the separation took place. Are you going to start paying American citizens now that go to jail for DWI or any other crime you classify as not important? Are you going to pay them for their separation? Where do you draw the line?
What happens to the numbers coming
They're
across?
coming. Any kind of, we talk about push-pull factors all the time. Talk about a pull factor. When people start hearing, and by the way, it's never the whole story, right? So no one's going to say, hey, if you meet these 82 criteria, you'll get $400,000. The message going down south is going to be, hey, all these people that crossed the border illegally, they sued and they got $400,000 or $1 million for a family each. Yeah, the wave is already coming. It's just going to continue to increase. I've yet to see this administration take one single action to try to stop the flow. Their entire border security plan, if you go back, they posted it on the White House, was like 5 bullets about how they were going to fix the world so that people wouldn't want to come to the United States as much.
Right, right. The states seem like the most obvious place to start to fix it. Can they fix it? Can Texas, secure Texas? Is there any way?
It's very, very difficult. It's a Band-Aid, but I do applaud their efforts. I actually signed on when I retired with a nonprofit called Texas Public Policy Foundation. And really that's what it's looking at, is reasonable, common sense policies that states can do or laws that they can put in place. And it is way beyond border security, but my piece of it is border security. But here's the thing, constitutionally, immigration and national security is fundamentally a federal responsibility. Mm-hmm. And they're advocating that responsibility. Not only is the federal government saying they're not going to enforce immigration law or really take the border serious, they're actually suing Texas and other states that are trying to take action and enforce those laws. It's a challenging time right now.
I have to end where we started, and that is, I'm deeply grateful as a citizen. I'm really sick of these people who have, high positions and then save everything for $1 million book. Because you don't even know if I should believe it. I mean, if it was that important, why did you wait for the book? I'm very impressed that you didn't wait. There's no book coming, or maybe there is, but you're spilling your guts now. Yeah, and I really appreciate all your hard work and your honesty. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I took an oath years ago, and I promised the agents I'd keep fighting for them. So that's all I'm trying to do.
God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Back in just a minute. Tomorrow on radio, we will have the update from Scotland. Today is the big financial meeting where all the banks from all over the world get together to talk about how they're going to stop you from hurting the climate. Oh, it's great. That and so much more on tomorrow's radio broadcast. From Dallas, the Mercury Studios, good night, America.